going to get started now. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Welcome once more. Just a reminder of our housekeeping rules. We do have interpretation available. Just click on the interpretation box at the bottom of your screen to choose your preferred language. Today's topic is quite interesting. We are going to be focusing on circular food systems for Africa. It's wonderful to see a few familiar faces in our session today. So before we engage with each other, because today we're hoping to have an engaging session, so we do welcome you to engage in the chat section. But before we get started, for those who may be new to our community of practice, if I could just ask everyone to, in the chat, just let us know who you are as well as where you're joining us from, just so we get a sense of who is here with us today, as well as where you're joining us from, and to get each other familiar with one another. The topic on food systems is very interesting, and today we're tying that to the circular economy. And we are having our session in two parts. We're going to start off with an overview of what food systems are. I think this will be valuable for those of us, especially me, who are not necessarily fully familiar with food systems, but might be familiar with circular economy or vice versa, and are looking to learn more about the topic. After that, we will then dive into trying to put some of this information into practice by getting a sense of what is happening around the continent. So looking at case studies that show how circular food systems are being implemented by entrepreneurs across the continent. And that will be led by our team from Footprints Africa, who will be sharing with us those case studies, as well as a very interesting website that they have created. If you were with us in our previous session, we did share some links to some of the work that Footprints Africa has been doing. And one of those links was to a stories website that takes you on a journey of different circular economy case studies and stories from across the continent. So today we're going to dive into those a little bit. So without wasting time, I would like to call on one of our colleagues from Eclipse Africa, who is in our food systems team, Ivan, to come and just give us an overview of what circular food systems are, but also taking that back a little bit and giving us a good sense of what food systems are. Over to you, Ivan.
Great, thank you very much, Shikudu. I'm just quickly going to share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thanks very much, and greetings, ladies and gentlemen. As Shikudu said, my name is Ivan Poe. I'm a professional officer at Eclipse Africa, working as part of the Urban Food Systems team. And thank you all for joining us today for this session, which is the 8th Circular African Cities Community of Practice meeting of 2022. I really look forward to exploring the concept of sustainable food systems with you and the important contribution of adopting circularity . Food is the broadened conceptualization of food system that captures the multifaceted and systemic nature of food. According to the high-level panel of experts on food and nutrition security, the food system is all the elements and activities that relate to the production, processing, distribution, preparation, and consumption of food, as well as the outputs of these activities, which include socioeconomic and environmental outcomes. The food system concept has emerged as a best practice conceptual framework for addressing issues relating to food security, agriculture, and nutrition. This narrative has developed in response to the narrow conceptualization of food security, which is often framed as a mere outcome of production, but this framing really fails to recognize the wide-ranging externalities of the greater food value chain and all of the actors involved. Using a broadened scope of food systems is incredibly important, as it allows us to understand and appreciate the interconnected and multifaceted nature of food value chains and the role they play in delivering food security, social well-being, and environmental sustainability. The unsustainability of the global food systems can be characterized in terms of these food systems outcomes or externalities. So diving into the context of food systems in Africa, looking at these outcomes, food insecurity in Africa is higher than in any other continent in the world, with an estimated 21% of the population experiencing food insecurity in 2020. That is 1 in every 5 people in the continent, and 100 million of those people have faced catastrophic levels of food insecurity in 2020 as well. This issue is further exacerbated by rising food and commodity prices, economic recessions, and climate change-induced disasters such as droughts and extreme weather events. Food and nutrition security, as we all know, is a central component of sustainable livelihoods and social well-being. When looking at social well-being as an element of, or rather as an outcome of the food systems, we're very much talking here about income, employment, health, equity, and then also culture and ethics. When looking at the conventional globalized food systems, one can see that the priority very much lies currently in maximizing production and minimizing inputs, taking very little consideration of social well-being. This in turn has caused the greater food system to become more exploitative, mechanized, and monopolized by large multinational corporations. These corporations tend to favor countries in which labor costs are low and environmental regulations relaxed, making food not only a driver of socioeconomic inequality, but environmental degradation as well. According to the European Union, 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions could be attributed to the food system, which makes it the second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions globally. Conventional agriculture is also a key driver of soil degradation, loss of biodiversity, and ecosystem services, which result from land use change and deforestation. So in order to change this, it's very helpful to develop a coherent conceptualization of what sustainable food systems actually are. The most widely recognized definition is one proposed by the Food and Agriculture Organization, which describes a sustainable food system as a food system that delivers food security and nutrition for all actors in a way that supports the economic, social, and environmental systems in which it's promotes environmental resilience and even spurs regeneration. We're narrowing the scope of specific issues such as, we're narrowing the scope to specific issues such as food waste. It becomes even more apparent how targeted interventions in the food system, such as integrating circularity, could provide wide-ranging benefits for both the people and the planet. Globally, around 30% of food produced for human consumption is lost or wasted along the supply chain. In Africa, this issue is far more severe, where between 30 and 50% of food production is wasted, 90% which ends up on landfills, which has significant social, economic, and environmental impacts. The severity of food waste is actually far greater when looking at more perishable products such as fruit, where waste often exceeds 50%. The food currently lost in Africa could feed up to 300 million people, which is quite a staggering figure when you take into consideration that between 250 and 300 million people in Africa experienced hunger in 2021. Just really highlighting this issue of food waste as a key lever for addressing food insecurity. In sub-Saharan Africa, post-harvest losses are estimated to be worth 4 billion per year, or enough to feed 48 million. The majority of food waste in African countries occurs at levels further down the value chain. Production obviously being a major contributor to food waste and food loss resulting from inadequate post-harvest strategies. But then there's also this element of the impact of the linear flow of resources and lack of infrastructure, such as storage facilities and cold chains, which leads to large amounts of food waste. In a continent where so many people are starving and many more people, particularly children and women, are undernourished, it is inconceivable to lose and waste food at this scale. It is for this reason that a reduction in food loss and food waste is one of the leading strategies for transforming Africa's food systems. Over the past decade, many local governments in Africa and across the world have implemented and are in the process of implementing sustainable food system strategies that really aim to develop more local food systems, strengthening food safety, reducing food loss, utilizing food waste, and leading climate action. These critical 10 actions that you see on the screen have emerged from the United Nations Food Systems Summit dialogue that was convened in 2021, that brought together a wide diversity of food systems actors and took place in a variety of countries. These actions were integrated into over 170 countries' food systems pathways and strategies, which is very much a national commitment that countries made toward developing more sustainable food systems. When taking a closer look at these 10 critical actions, many of these have the potential to improve the circular economy of food. These include fostering territorial linkages, investing in critical infrastructure and technologies, and leading climate action, and then, of course, straight to the point, reducing food waste and food loss. Now, when taking this issue a little bit and narrowing the scope to the urban context, it becomes apparent that the issue is far greater in African cities where urban populations are growing at exponential rates. And with that, insecurity is also growing and becoming, urban areas are almost becoming the playing field, the center stage of issues around food insecurities. Cities could be considered as both drivers and recipients of the unsustainable outcomes of food systems, particularly when taking into consideration that Africa's population is already at around 50% urban. And the ways in which food flows through cities speak to specific strategies that can be made to minimize waste, not only through more equitable distribution, but also the reutilization and integration of waste as an economic resource. Cities are not only the drivers, but also first line in facing the impacts of these linear economies. Linear economies are linked to a range of negative impacts in cities that are being placed under further pressure to deliver sustainable food systems in the face of challenges around growing food insecurity, the impacts of large-scale urbanization, and the high rates of food loss and food waste. The circular economy is one of the approaches that can be adopted in the food system to resolve many of the aforementioned challenges, as many of us can imagine. For this discussion, we're using a conceptualization or a framing of circular economy that I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with, which is a closed-loop system of resource management, which ensures continuous use of materials, goods, energy, and waste. And I hope through the brief introduction of food systems, one can begin to see how this definition could be adopted and integrated into food systems. So Eclipse framework for circularity includes 5 strategies: rethink, regenerate, reduce, reuse, and recover. This framework unpacks what the circular economy concept means at a local level and how cities can influence value chains through different interventions. The framework can be applied to all production, consumption, and waste management processes influenced by the city, local businesses, or residents. One could see how this is an incredibly important consideration for food systems once again. And into what it looks like when the concept of circularity in food systems are integrated, one finds what's called circular food systems, which are defined by Eclipse as systems that prioritize regenerative production, favor reuse and sharing practices, reduce resource inputs and pollution, and ensure resource recovery for future users. As such, they close resource loops and pursue cross-sectoral synergies that really contribute to the resilience of territory, focusing on the local context. So And we can see that adopting circularity in the food systems is a key ingredient for contributing to its sustainability. Adopting a circular lens on the food system will also support the local economy and help create the enabling conditions and collaboration mechanisms to advance these goals. When looking at the next two slides, it's very much around the benefits of circular food systems, which is very much related to climate action and biodiversity protection, but also strengthening resilience, specifically by reducing our dependence on specific resources and improving efficiency of systems and resource flows, and emphasizing the interconnectedness between these resources such as energy and water. There's also then wide-ranging social benefits, which could play a really big role in streamlining socioeconomic development and offering opportunities for developing social enterprises and streamlining innovation within these enterprises that aim to have social impact as well as contribute to economic growth. We will now see how circular food systems can be implemented through a series of critical actions that can be taken by different stakeholders, from the production all the way to the household level. Every single stakeholder has a role to contribute to formulating a more circular food system. The first being rethink, which is very much about redesigning the system to really be conducive to innovation and open to developing new ways of doing things. This can be achieved through supporting collaboration across the value chain and the variety of actors that are involved in the value chain, and then also offering incentives and policies to encourage innovative solutions. The second being regeneration, which is very much about developing systems to coexist in harmony with nature. Critical actions for streamlining this include leveraging nature-based solutions that are also really a growing phenomenon, and then also supporting regenerative activities such as regenerative urban farming and really supporting the urban farming sector by, for instance, collecting waste from households, restaurants, retail outlets, and redistributing it to urban farms to regenerate the waste almost as a part of the greater system. There's also the element of reduction, which is very much around reducing our dependency on specific resources and designing infrastructure that also requires less inputs. And I think here is also the element of agricultural production, which is highly dependent on external inputs, which are often very detrimental to the environment, and to just reduce that and think around developing production systems that require less inputs and are very much more in harmony with nature. So as you can see, a lot of these actions are very much interlinked, and in this context, supporting the production of food locally is an incredibly important consideration, as it will also reduce the impacts of like very long and extensive linear food value chains on which we currently depend. The next action is very much about reusing, which is about encouraging and partaking of the reuse of products and infrastructure that preserves food, designing food packaging and products that are reusable. This is all about framing our conceptualization of waste, particularly in food systems, where waste could also be actually viewed as a resource that could be reused to contribute to the productivity and sustainability of the greater food system. Then there's recovery, which is all about this element of closing the loop and actually making the system circular, where all actors along the value chain actually have a really important role to play, especially all of us in this room and within our own households, just by separating our trash and keeping all of our organic waste separate, and then ensuring that it doesn't end up on landfill and actually gets reintegrated into the economy, I think is a fascinating element of circular food systems, because just as everyday citizens, we actually have quite an important role to play in supporting this. And that was the last of the actions from my side. Thank you very much. I hope you found this very brief presentation stimulating and insightful, and I really look forward to having conversations with all the participants present around sustainable food systems and the important role that circularity plays in strengthening that. Thanks very much, and over to you, Jakudu.
Thank you so much, Ivan. Thank you for the presentation as well as the various insights that you have shared. I think from the chat, we've also seen from Joanna that the stats that you shared were quite jarring and are definitely a wake-up call for many of us on just our behaviors around food systems, as well as the amount of food that gets lost, and just thinking through, well, reiterating some of those stats, that 30% of food is actually wasted, and trying to imagine how much of that could feed so many more people, which are in the millions. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to resolve these challenges. I think for me, the first question I would perhaps try to throw out to you is maybe just to hear a little bit more about those critical actions that you had mentioned. We didn't get time to hear in detail about them, so maybe just reflecting a little bit on those, but also just noting that you pointed out some very nice actions, and we will be seeing some ways in which these can be implemented, ways in which different entrepreneurs have been taking action across the continent. So before you jump on, maybe also just to respond to a question that has come through, we will share the slides after the event with everyone. And then just before you also respond to my question, to also check in from Joanna, if you wouldn't mind coming in after Ivan's input, to just reflect on your points around food systems and your interest, as well as just the points that you had noted about looking for more visual representations of what is taking place across the continent. So back to you, Ivan.
Apologies, Jakudu, my connection actually cut out there for a few seconds, so I might have missed the question. Sorry about that.
Yes, no problem. I was just wondering if you could reflect a little bit more on the critical actions that you had started presenting on. So maybe just to hear a little bit more about those and what they mean for circular food systems.
Sure, thanks. It happened again, but I think I got your question there. So the 10 critical actions were developed to complement also what we framed as 5 strategic areas. And in essence, these critical actions and strategic areas emerged from the United Nations Food Systems Summit Dialogues, which was convened by ICLEI Africa in collaboration, or ICLEI, in collaboration with the Food and Agriculture Organization. And it was very much around bringing a wide variety of actors in the food systems of specific countries together. Now, this included local governments, regional governments, national governments, and then also private sector, civil society organizations, and then also farmer organizations and agribusinesses, and also representatives of the informal sector. So a wide variety of stakeholders were pulled into these conversations to really develop a coherent and pragmatic understanding of where the issues lie. And from the reports, which I'll find the link to some of the reports that emerged from these dialogues and share it in the chats shortly. Food waste was such a critical element. And of course, there are many different approaches to addressing the issue of food waste. But in an urban context, integrating or adopting circularity is by far one of the most supported and widely recognized strategies to do so. So it was very interesting to see how these dialogues really almost enhanced the narrative of circularity in the food system, and that was also being complemented by the emergence of the consideration of, for instance, food, water, energy linkages, and just really drawing linkages between food and other sectors. And yeah, it also led to several countries adopting circularity as a key approach to developing more sustainable food systems. Over.
Thank you so much, Ivan. I think I also had some technical challenges and missed your response, but I hope everyone was able to get a sense of what you were saying. Perhaps today jump over to Joanna quickly for an input, and then from there I do know that Daniel does have some reflections that he would be able to share with us, so from we'll get some insights from Daniel.
Over to you, Joanna. You can go for it.
Thanks, Jakudu. Yeah, I mean, those
Joanna.
figures, every time I see those figures, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Knowing that farmers make all that effort to grow crops and that so much is wasted and lost. It's so heartbreaking, especially when we see the figures of poverty and climate change, etc. But one of the things that we're currently part of a team that's drafting an action plan and roadmap for Ghana for circular economy, and food systems is obviously a critical part of that. And I'm very curious. Obviously, it differs from crop to crop, as you mentioned, Ivan. Fruit and some of the kind of more perishable products have higher rates. And it depends in different areas and things like that. And one of the things that we've been looking at is, for example, how loss might be experienced. For example, aflatoxin, which is a kind of mold that some crops get. The crop may be rejected by the buyer, for example, at the point of processing, but the issue is established at the point of harvesting and the process after the harvesting. So it takes a while to come down the chain. But the impacts that have started earlier in the chain. And I think if we can see and start to identify like where in the chain the issues are happening and see some more visuals, I think that will be really helpful to start to help focus people's minds on where action needs to be taken. So my question was really if anyone knows of any visuals that exist, particularly kind of specific to crops. I would love to see those. And then my second point was around cold chains, which I know is a topic that's been discussed much for many different African countries. And it's a big infrastructural investment, and it requires stable roads, good quality vehicles. The connection points between when products are being dropped off, they need to be also have the cold chain. And so I was wondering if there are low-tech options, if we're always focusing on kind of refrigeration, but there are other different options that maybe can be deployed. I know there are, clay pots is one example, but there are different ways that people have been managing storage for years to prevent things from perishing, and whether we can be more thoughtful and learn from the past in that regard. So if anyone has any examples on those of that, I saw that Christo added a link to a video, but I'll watch that after.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Joanna. I think what's standing out to me is also what you're mentioning around the need for low-tech options and solutions that are much cheaper and perhaps easier to implement would be a valuable way to respond to some of the challenges that we are seeing around food loss and how to resolve that. Just to highlight some questions as well as inputs that have come in from the chat from Peter, as well as from Justine, which were quite similar on agreeing with your points, Joanna, on the need. And I think just to read what Peter had said, startling data when you relate food waste to the number of people affected. And he's then wondering whether the definition of urban food systems actually includes peri-urban areas, as well as whether it also includes the informal settlements and the informal sector. That is a very key reflection to include, because a lot of the times we do miss out on the role that these different stakeholders play in supporting the urban environment, specifically from peri-urban areas, the food that then gets transported into cities, but also from the informal sector and the role that's played there from informal collection of waste, whether that might perhaps include the collection of organic waste. And then just to again highlight the point that then followed there on from Justine, which is what is the role of cooperatives in achieving circular food systems? And I'm also wondering if there's anyone who would be able to respond to those two inputs, as well as from our room if there's anyone who would be able to also respond to the role that that we can see from governance. So I'm hoping, Daniel, you would be able to touch on at least probably one of those comments. So I'll hand over to you for inputs, as well as please feel free to put any reflections that you might have on those points in the chat.
Thank you very much, Jokulu, for that. I think my initial reflection was going to be around the Eclipse Circular Actions Cities Framework and the 5 principles that I think Ivan has alluded to. I just wanted to reflect on some examples also, and then I think that we touch on some aspect of governance. And if you look at what Ivan shared with us, he shared our principles, which are rethink, regenerate, reuse, reduce, and recover. And when we talk about rethink, essentially, just like he said, it's about redesigning the system. And in a way that there are 2 points that are very key to me, or that I like about that is, number one is about restructuring the urban space and value chain. So essentially, when we say restructuring the urban space, it also speaks to the importance of what we call food sensitive planning. In other words, we must pay attention to where we locate our markets and ensure that they are located very closely to where consumers are. So that we can be able to reduce food miles, which basically also contributes to carbon emissions. And so I think that's one example. The other thing is about cross-sectoral collaboration. And that's why in our work, we've always been emphasizing that the local government or cities need not to, and departments within these cities, they don't need to work in isolation, they need to work together. And when we look at, for instance, I'll take example of the web systems, water, energy, and food systems. We say if we can promote synergy within these systems, and the department responsible for these systems is going to be very good. And a classical example is that of green roofs in cities, which basically you put the green roof together in cities and essentially use it to store in water. And that also helps in mitigating floods. And this kind of green roof can also support urban agriculture. So when we say create space for urban agriculture within urban areas, it's part of redesigning the system. And so green roof can be a solution in this, and then it's helping also reducing food mass, because you see that you have at least vegetables around the city. Another example I think that I can also allude to is that of reuse, which emphasizes using for longer. And then you see one aspect that I think is common in South Africa is what we call food banks, where you have food that will probably go to waste very soon. There is a bank in which that is stored, and it got me to be thinking that why can't we? I think we've got some innovators doing that actually now, but then it's another example of both redesigning and within the reuse or sharing aspect, where you bring people or companies that have food that maybe wants to go to waste. It's possible to design an app where you basically go, and people that actually need this food before it goes to waste can go to that app and see for themselves, okay, oh, this company have this available, and this is maybe the hub where I can get this kind of. So it will, in a way, promote food from going to waste, and then you assist us to reduce food waste. Another thing is also precision agriculture that we have seen, and I can allude to the East Africa project, where one of the companies was also focusing on precision agriculture and using drones for insecticide. So when you use that kind of thing, it reduces the amount of insecticide you use on your farms. And they are basically a consulting company going around and trying to project that and say, hey, we are available, so you are available to manage this kind of thing for you, so that you can eliminate or reduce the insecticide you use on your farms. And I think these are some of the innovations that are coming up within the food system space that we need to pay attention to reduce waste and to promote sharing and essentially redesign the food system as it were. So I think yeah. And there's a question that talks about cooperatives. What is the role of cooperative within the circular economy? I think apart from cooperatives, just like we know in Africa, they assist people to be able to raise funds. And so in a way, if you have cooperatives people coming together within cooperative, they can decide that this is the innovation within the food system that we want to actually invest in, or supports one of their members who have that idea have talked about and how that we can use to bring consumers and producers together and shorten the food miles and all of that. So cooperatives can actually decide that we want to invest in that or support a member that wants to actually invest in that. I think that's an example where you can see cooperatives contributing to circular food systems.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for those insights into technologies and innovation that we should be keeping a lookout for. I think what you've mentioned also ties in quite well to a comment that just came in from Deborah not too long ago that highlighted that sometimes what we are seeing is actually a disjuncture between producers and consumers. And she then pointed out that perhaps we should be trying to focus on how we shift the way people think about food and the selling of food, and not necessarily focusing on the profits, but more so on ensuring that what we are then taking out of the system is actually landing up on people's tables and food that then becomes nutritious for people to eat. And I thought that was quite a vital point to bring out, especially with Daniel's reflection on the role that government plays in shaping how people view food systems and the role that food plays in our communities. So looking at how we can be more creative about identifying these intervention points that can be used to take on circular economy. We do not have enough time to go through all the comments in the chat, but we appreciate them, and please do read all the inputs that everyone has put in. We will now be jumping into the next segment of our program, where we will be taking these conversations forward and looking at some of these different examples. So I'll be calling on our colleague from Footprints Africa to take us through a few case studies before we jump into a discussion on these, as well as what these mean for food systems. Over to you, Victor.
All right, thanks, Jukudu. So hi, everyone. Very insightful presentation from Ivan and insightful discussions.
Victor, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear Victor.
Me too.
I think it's Jukudu.
Sorry, I might be the one facing technical issues.
Yeah, I'm looking at Victor.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Victor Jalvin. I'm currently on the research team at Footprints Africa, and I'm currently based in Ghana. And one interesting thing we've been doing at Footprints is to try and build a comprehensive. Sorry, let me just share my screen quickly. Can you all see that? Can you all see my screen? Okay, fine. Yes. Okay. So one interesting thing we've been doing at Footprints is we built a comprehensive database of 500 plus cases of businesses engaging in circular economy in Africa. So I'll just be sharing with you a few of such cases and relating to the food systems. So the first one is Luno, which can be found in Côte d'Ivoire. So what they do is they develop technologies, but usually biodigesters and biocomposters, usually targeted at rural farmers to make it easier for them to be able to access these technologies and also make it easier for them to maintain. These farmers usually produce cocoa and rubber, and when they harvest them to produce the chocolate that we all love, they usually generate a lot of waste. So Luno designed this technology to help them transform this agricultural waste into compost, biofuels, and animal feeds. So if you look to the lower left, you see an example of the technologies that Luno designs. Currently, they are operating two models. One is a domestic scale, and the other one is an industrial scale model. So what you can see down there, just the domestic scale, so it's much smaller, but the industrial scale is a little much larger to help reduce incineration of this agricultural waste. And the second one would be in Kenya, that's co-region. They are a consortium of 3 companies. They usually focus on tea farmers. They are trying to operate a closed loop model. So what they do is they receive this residues which are high in carbon from farmers. So these are usually like the nut shells, the husks, and then the tea prunings. And they take this through a process of gasification to produce energy, which is then given to the farmers farmers and then to low-income communities who are unable to afford electricity. A byproduct of this gasification process is biochar, which the farmers can then apply to their soils, which is very beneficial, such as reduces the amount of fertilizers they have to put into their soil. And we know that fertilizer is usually one of the highest cost components of production. The biochar also keeps water in the soil, and then also increases yield, which that's what every farmer is looking to do. They want to increase it so they can make more money. And so that's the model. So that's the closed loop model that CoRegen operates. Then the next one is in Egypt, which is Tekaya, related to Ivan's presentation on the food waste. So the stats he mentioned, 30-40% of food is being wasted in Africa. We have so many people going hungry. And so the team at Tekaya looking at the situation in Egypt where people were below the poverty line. I think about 20% of people are below the poverty line, and so are not able to afford food maybe 3 times a day or even twice a day. And then looking at restaurants and shops, the amount of food going to waste, which is perfectly edible. So usually in restaurants, the meals that they're not able to serve during the day, they might just throw it away. Or when you look at supermarkets, when they are done selling and they want to change their stock, if no one is buying, they'd have to find some way to get rid of that. So all these maybe end up in the landfill. So what Tekaya did was to create an app that connects these supermarkets and restaurants to people who are unable to afford the food at maybe the full price. So on the app, the prices are at a 50% discount. So it makes it easier for people to be able to afford the food. And what I find interesting about them is that what is not sold on the platform is then donated to charity. And so that way there's much food is prevented from going to waste. Currently they are operating on a business to consumer model, but they are looking to operate a business to business model. And they've been in operation since 2019. The last one we'll look at is home in Ghana here where I am. That's Safisana. So the issue they tried to tackle here was they realized that a lot of sewage was going into the environment, and treated sewage was going to the environment, and also a lot of organic waste. And then they looked at the soils in Africa and in Ghana and realized that these soils were very degraded. And so in trying to solve these problems, they did a little research and found a way of using anaerobic digestion to convert these wastes into electricity, compost, and then irrigation water. So for the biogas is used to produce methane, which they then sell to the national grid company here in Ghana to help cover the deficit of electricity in the country. And then what I really like about this one is the fact that this is the only one I think I came across that is able to produce irrigation water, which I know is one of the problems that farmers have because they are not able to, because of climate change, they are not able to find and have water to water their crops all year round. So this was a very, very interesting initiative for me. And the compost they produce has the extra benefit of making sure that the soils are always fertile. Soils are always fertile. So these are just a few of the case studies we are looking at related to the food systems. So we will just go into short breakout rooms to discuss 4 breakout rooms. Each room will take one case study, and then we'll discuss, and then we'll come back and then just have a discussion where you can share maybe interesting insights as related to the case study, or maybe if there's something interesting you want to share with the team, we can do that. And after that, I will take you through our African Stories website, which Jukudu mentioned, just to give you an idea of all the cases we've been able to collect so far. Thank you. So Jukudu, over to you.
Thank you so much, Victor. What I've done is I've created 4 breakout rooms, each highlighted by the case study that you will be discussing in your group. Can I quickly just note that anyone who is French speaking, please do not accept the invitation to join a breakout room. We will have a breakout room for you here in the main plenary. Please join the breakout rooms to discuss the questions that have been listed. My colleague will paste the questions in the chat, but just to remind you of these, it's are these businesses or case studies circular, and identifying why or why not. How else can we, the second question is, how else can we incorporate the circular economy to food systems, and how is innovation integrated into these case studies? As well as just noting what Victor had mentioned, is there anything that stands out for you from these case studies? A reminder to please appoint one person from your breakout rooms to feedback in 1 minute, something key or important that was discussed in your group. So I'm opening the room now. Thank you so much for having joined us in the breakout rooms and the discussions that we had there. Before I hand over to Victor, can I just perhaps note that because of time, when we do share our reflections, could we try and keep them to just 1 minute? I will hand over now to Victor to share some reflections from the breakout rooms and to facilitate that discussion.
Okay, so for my group, Ivan would be sharing first. So maybe Ivan, just quickly, and then we move on.
Yeah, thanks, Victor. So we had the case study of the business in Kenya that utilizes organic waste from agricultural production for energy and as well as compost. I forgot the name now. Yeah, to us this was definitely a really great example of circular economy. One interesting concern that was raised, I think especially in the context of African food systems, that's really important, is it to what extent can the benefit really be drawn from this, seeing as there are several smallholder farmers all across Africa, so the waste that they produce is actually very small and cannot always lead to the production of biomass energy. So it's quite interesting, I think, to consider models of cooperatives and almost like farmer organizations in which the waste could collectively be collected from all the different farmers. Yeah, so it's just a question of scale that came up that I think was quite interesting. I think that was 1 minute. I wish we had more.
Thank you very much, Ivan. For the Lono group, who is to share with us?
Okay, right. So in my team, I think 2 things stood out for us in the conversation about how an example was given in Nigeria, how the increasing cost of fuel, that non-renewable fuel, is making people look towards the area of biogas and this renewable energy. And so the point is that Lono is it's using agricultural waste to produce biofuels. Then we can tap into some of this need that people have to have a reduced cost of fuel production or of the items they need, and then get people to use these options by making it optional, by making it less costly, by making it accessible, and also by making it communal, because we see most of these people just use this maybe for themselves or maybe organizations, but if we have a way to make it much more communal so that it's less costly for people, then that could be a great opportunity. And also I noticed that most of the people in my room did not know about Lono, and so there is that need for us to keep sharing these examples so people would know such examples exist and such opportunities could be tapped into. We spoke about Liberia, where they are using they have this eco stove that they're using, which still uses wood as fuel, but then it uses like a quarter of the wood that would have been used on a normal day. So if they knew about these biofuels, then how could they integrate, or they could initiate these instead of the normal wood or the eco stove that they're using, so that people could get to know about it, and then we can produce more value for farmers and also value for the agricultural waste. Okay, is that 1 minute? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It was really interesting to find out that people didn't really know about Lono, and so I guess maybe sharing the stories website would be a good way to create awareness of the circular initiatives across Africa. And so just moving on to Safisana and groups who's sharing just 1 minute.
Okay, so I'm sharing for Safisana. And yes, we agree that Safisana is doing something circular. And then what we thought could be added or could be done is using solar energy for cold rooms, in terms of other innovation that can be done. Using solar energy for cold rooms, and also tapping more into the local ways of preserving things adding value locally to prevent waste, and also packaging, looking at alternative ways of packaging food locally and using biodegradable or sustainable materials. We think that the use of app and then giving food to charity that is done in Egypt is very interesting. And also the chemical analysis that probably Safisana uses is also interesting. We think we can look at commercializing or scaling up local solutions through technology to make sure that whatever we are doing is very sustainable. And one interesting story that came up is the use of public cold storage rooms in Nigeria, where people are providing commercial storage facilities at public places for people to pay a small fee to keep their vegetables and other perishable goods at the marketplaces.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I think Ivy has done the work for Tekeya. She's mentioned it was an interesting initiative, but maybe you guys could just quickly add to what she's already said. And Tekeya, who's sharing with me.
I think Peter took some notes, so I'm going to hand over to Peter.
I was kind of worried you were going to say that, Joanna.
I saw you writing, so I was like, oh great, I don't have to take notes.
And it's terribly unfair because my memory is so poor, I have to write down things, otherwise it goes in one ear and out the other. So thinking about what, we got cut off, of course I got cut off as we came out of the group. But the things that I suppose struck me, Lekea was in Pretoria and working on food security and biowaste was in the room. And I think for me, one big question I think I brought in the chat earlier was about how would this sort of system which they run in Egypt, selling food at a discount or giving it away to charity if it's not sold at a discount from restaurants, how would that work in informal settlements in Africa? It just struck me that I'm based in the UK. What we heard about Tekeya in Egypt didn't sound too dissimilar, but I think in sub-Saharan Africa things would be very different in the way it works. And one of Hugo's points was about what happens to the food that isn't sold at the end of the day. Where does it go? Does it go to landfill, or can it be composted and do something else? I think the idea is an important one. Get small-scale initiatives to link with smaller retailers, which I think would be more appropriate within informal settlements. So I'm sure I've had a minute by now. So back to you.
Thank you all for such interesting discussions and sharing these insights with us in the main group. So maybe just in the interest of time, I'll just quickly go into the African Stories website. So I'll drop the.
Sorry, Victor, before you go on, we did have a discussion in the French room, and I just wanted to check if Saka could come in and just share with us in 30 seconds, just a quick reflection from that discussion, or would that be
okay?
Yes.
I will try to make it in English.
Okay.
And I have to close the French channel. Thank you. Yes, we haven't discussed one of the presentations made previously in the previous session, but we have discussed with Chabi Bienvenue from Benin in Abomey-Calavi, close to Cotonou, the capital city. And within his NGO, sorry, Chabi Bienvenue with others produce some compost and develop a training center in the city where households can learn how to produce some compost, how to produce some biopesticide and grow vegetables and fresh fruits and vegetables. What is nice with this experience is that the NGO work closely with the company that collect waste in the city, and from this waste they segregate the waste, the organic component to produce compost. Secondly, they raise awareness of households and provide some training, really focusing circular economy through the food system. Thirdly, they through this initiative, they have triggered some business opportunity for young people to develop fresh food production in Above-Calavi and to reply to the market. And at the end, Chabi Bienvenue is also developing some new technology to improve biomineralization, so to make the process more efficient of biocomposting. So a clear presentation, very interesting and very practical in Above-Calavi.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Could you share the name of the organization in the chat with me? Everyone?
Yes, for sure.
Right, thank you. Okay, so let me just quickly share my screen for the Stories website. Okay, so the link to the website has been dropped in the chat. So maybe when we are done the presentation, you could then go through in your free time just to have a look at what's been done so far. So when you click on the link, it should bring you to this landing page. So you could start your adventure by clicking here, but that would usually just take you down to the created journeys. So just taking you through this landing page, when you scroll down, you have a brief definition of circular economy. And so you can click on the link with the Ellen Atta Foundation just to read a little more on the circular economy. This is just a brief. And then when you scroll down, it just tells you that will be taking you on a journey. So that's how the cases have been arranged, so that it doesn't be like a block of text that you have to read, but it's just like you going through a journey, making it easier for you to follow and then understand the case studies. And so when you come below, here's where we have the created journey. So when you look down, they have been organized into sectors. So we have regenerative agriculture, construction, plastics, e-waste. And then if you just want to mix things up, you could choose the random one, or you could click this to plan your own journey. So you could search by either a story name or by a filter. Maybe you want cases from a particular country or from a particular category. So you could choose the country you want to, or you could choose the sector you want to. So just going back and maybe just going through one, so that's easy for us. So I would just start with regenerative agriculture, since it's almost in line with what we're discussing so far. So when you look at the top, this is just a way for you to navigate through the case studies. So there are usually about 6 different case studies in each journey. So you could navigate through just to look at them, or you could take it one at a time. And then when you eventually get to the next one, so just let's start with Oco Forest. So what it does, that presents you just a brief on the organization, what they do. And when you scroll down, you have their circular strategies on the right. And so for this one, they are prioritizing regenerative resources and designing for the future. You could click down here to see the SDGs they are contributing to, and then just maybe a quote from the founder. And then down there gives you like a more detailed discussion of what they do. So what was the opportunity time? What was the problem they were trying to solve? There's just a short video you could watch on the initiative. Then you have the story, that's just internet story, what motivated him to create this organization. And then we have the solution, how he was able to solve the problem he identified. And on the side, you can decide to visit the websites, maybe to read a little more on the organization itself. And then you can take a short quiz. It's not compulsory to take the quiz, but it's just to make it more fun for you. It's more about what you've read so far and what you can remember. So if I take the quiz, there's just a few questions usually around the location. So they just ask you a few questions that were present in the detailed discussion of the organization. So you just choose just to see what you can remember about what you read. And then when you are done, you could submit your answers and then go back to the journey. And so when you're done with that, it just moves you on to the next one. And so you move like that until you get to the end. And then you can then decide to maybe start another journey. Or if you were just interested in regenerative agriculture, then you could end there. So that's just a little on our African Stories websites, and that's how it is. So in your free time, you just click the link, and then you yourself can take yourself through the journey just to experience the feel of it. So thank you very much. I think that was all. This. So, okay, you could go. Okay.
Thank you so much
Right.
for sharing this website. I think I really like the simplicity of it and the journey that it takes you on. And the case studies are very much, the quizzes are very much a nice addition to them to just help you remember what you have just been reading, as well as internalize some of the information that's coming through from the cases. Perhaps maybe if anyone has any additional reflections to share on what Victor has presented, or perhaps our discussions from today. Joanna did point out in the chat that the team from Happy Porch who supported with the development of this website are actually present in the room. So just to extend a thank you as well to them for having joined us today. So I'll just give 1 minute to hear from the group if anyone has any additional reflections to share from today's discussion. And while perhaps everyone thinks, maybe just to highlight that there were very wonderful reflections that came out from the discussions. I think from the French breakout room, for me, I really enjoyed getting to hear a new case study of something that that an organization in Benin is working on, and just getting insight into how they've taken on actually implementing circular economy in the food system space, but also taking the time to support with training and tech for communities to also get on board with the initiatives that they're taking on. It was nice to hear from the group, I believe from the Takaya group, on the importance of scaling up the different activities that are taking place and what it means to scale up the different things that need to be considered, such as, is there enough input coming in if you would like to take on, for example, composting? Is there enough organic matter that's available to take on those activities? And then again, contrasting that to the case study from the inputs from Lono, and appreciating Deborah's input on the need for more case studies. That was actually very helpful. Not everyone is fully aware of what's taking place. And so when we continue to share these case studies, we give each other the opportunity to think outside the box, to learn of new innovative ideas to take on or even try in our different contexts. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today and for the discussion that we've had. I think there were very wonderful and fruitful inputs that have been shared, and we're looking forward to reading more of the case studies that have been shared in the chat, as well as taking on some of these ideas that have been shared. Next week, Thursday, we will be sharing again a digest of today's discussion, so you'll be able to access many of the key resources that we have shared, as well as just a few insights from today's discussion. So thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day, and we'll see you in our next Community of Practice session.
Thank you.